everyone, and welcome back to our series of interesting interviews all about risk. Everything that we ever wanted to know, you can find out just by listening to us. Today, I am really excited, delighted to have a very special person with us today, Lizabeth Marvan. She is the CEO, president, she's the founder. She's done everything with RHISCO, all about risk. And Elizabeth, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's really great, and I feel honored for your invitation. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a pleasure for us to have you here. I thought maybe what we do is start out, just tell us a little bit about what you are doing at RHISCO. I'm curious as to what made you create the company and what you're focused on, and maybe you could share that with our audience.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Well, originally the company meant to resolve problems or things that our clients wouldn't typically be able to resolve from a risk management perspective, from an angle of technology solutions. So yes, in terms of consulting services, but trying to resolve those elements of the systems they needed to use to be able to measure risk. That was why it was originally created. But through time, it evolved to have its own products as well as expertise or consulting that are specialized in different themes, not just risk, but also regulatory requirements on a broader perspective, as well as compliance from a governance standpoint, regulatory requirements standpoint, as well as standards, international standards. So nowadays, what RHISCO does do is try to resolve or help our clients from an end-to-end throughout the whole spectrum of what they need to do, either in risk management, compliance, return and risk, as well as some regulatory requirements.
Interesting. Are there some common elements to what companies are challenged with in dealing with risk management, especially the governance aspects? Are there some things that you are seeing out there that, while it may be in England or Latin America or the US, it's really something that's common, that's a challenge for risk managers today?
Well, I think that the common thing I can see, it might be twofold. First, in terms of the evolving technologies, so you need to make sure that you're using the technology that is most appropriate for what you're doing. So it used to be kind of going into a one single platform across all risks. Mm-hmm. But through time, it evolved into you need to resolve it as easier as possible from a kind of a different silo elements, trying to do it more efficiently from an economic point of view, so it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Mm-hmm. So I am seeing that majority of organizations are facing with the problem of, okay, now I have new technologies that are available. What I need to make sure is that my staff or the team members are up to speed in the different new skills, or that they have appropriate education in terms of how to approach risks. So in terms of governance, I think that would be one element, but the other main one is around things that allow companies to have a much better view of what is coming down the road, what are the emerging potential risks that are coming down. But those risks could be different depending on the company and depending on the region, depending on what sector you are talking about. But the common thing is that you have to see a single view. You have to understand that there are many things that are interacting and that are interdependent in a way. So you have to have a much broader perspective of what is the governance of what you're doing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm intrigued a little bit with your comment on emerging risk, because there are so many out there and not all of them are going to knock on our door. Have you come across any techniques or styles that help CEOs kind of recognize what are the pressing emerging risk versus those that are out there, but I don't need to worry about them yet? You know what I mean?
Yeah. What I've seen is that there are some CEOs that would be basing their perspectives or their strategic objectives. They would be talking to different industry experts. They would be talking to the association. They would be talking to regulators and to some observers, as well as some industry people who would be discussing, or industry experts that are, for example, in themes like ESG, themes that are different, that typically wouldn't necessarily be considered. What CEOs are doing is trying to keep abreast of what is going on out there, what's happening, what are people talking about, and then understand what are the potential implications for their own company or organization. So is more like maintain themselves aware of what's going on, but not just in the news, but also in different formal or informal think tanks, and speaking with different industry experts that go around. So those are the things that I've seen kind of much more typical or more frequent for different type of organizations.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like what you're saying is that as a CEO, I want to pay attention to what's going on in the news, but that's not my only font of information. I should be engaged with my associations, my industry, and with peers to know what's impacting and what they see coming down the pike as well.
Yes, definitely. And also one other thing that maybe is not in everyone's mind is that there are these thinkers, let me call them that way, people and institutions that call themselves futuristics, or that they are focused on how the world is going to be in 20 years, in 10 years, in 30 years. So they might have a view that it is very far-fetching, that maybe one can say, well, yeah, right, like that is going to happen. However, those, if you pay attention to those as well, they might tell you something about what are the different scenarios where the world might end up. I mean, it might be a low probability scenario, but it is a scenario where the world might end. So, or where a specific sector might end. So as a risk manager, you need to be aware of what would be the plausible scenarios, especially those scenarios that would be adverse to you or to the position that you have. And then consider those scenarios as well to be prepared, to understand what measures you would need to do or to apply, what things you might need to investigate further, what are the threats that your business or your industry is facing, who are going to be your next competitors, because it might not be that obvious. It might come from a different sector or from a different type of entity. So that is something that I don't see frequently used by CEOs, but I think it's a very good source of, if not information, it would be a very good source of triggers to think differently and see the world differently and prepare for that.
You know, Elizabeth, I love that. I wrote down here awareness of extremes, because that will take me back to this conversation. That's very insightful. I really appreciate that, because I know most of us are conservative, and even if we're liberal in our management styles, we sometimes don't listen to futurists. And we don't, like when I was growing up and watching Star Trek, we didn't pay attention to the handheld recorders back and forth, and now we have handheld telephones. So it's a great point, and I don't think many people do that. So thank you for sharing that with us, especially with the audience. That's very interesting. Let's go back to something that you said, which kind of raised a little alarm for me. And that's because I tend to believe in enterprise risk management. And if I understood you correctly, you said that a lot of technology solutions, companies may want to focus on a solution that addresses a specific need over a solution that may address a broader perspective. Am I interpreting that right? And if so, why would you say that? And if I'm interpreting it wrong, correct me so that we can see exactly what it is. But I find it really interesting, and I could see that I could see a good argument on both sides. Could you just explore that a little bit more with us?
I'll explain a little bit better. So what I've seen probably the last 5-8 years is that there are plenty of people who want to just contribute to the knowledge of the industry. That they write code and they open the code to somebody to use. There's plenty of that for example, in the market risk management, because you know that in market risk, all things about pricing and interest rates and volatility and so on and so forth. You have a lot of libraries that are available in the internet that are for free, that you can download it, you can use it, and it is very specific. It resolves the very complex such and such instrument or product and gives you the price. It gives you a mark to market considering XYZ. And then you don't have to pay. I mean, if you have, obviously you have to have the skills internally in the organization to be able to understand and use those. For example, there is plenty of quant-lib code around the world on that. And then when you compare that to, for example, how much money a technology vendor is charging you for a platform that goes across the risk management spectrum, well, you need to consider whether you are willing to pay so much money, or if you have so much money to pay for that, that would be another point. Or if you prefer to invest in having a much better team, much better prepared, a better educated, or probably a more research type team, where you do internalize that, and then you just connect external services, technology services that would help you with the management of the data, or that would help you with the flow of the process, or that would help you with the validation, which is I think in a much better way potentially, because when you go into the software, when you go into the technology world, I'm not a programmer, I have to first disclose that, you realize that the software cannot do everything well. A single piece of software, even if it is a monolithic software, it cannot just do everything well or perfectly. It would do very well something and very poorly some other thing, and it wouldn't just do anything about X, Y, Z, all the things. So in that in that way, if you combine, or let me put make a leap into the fintech world. There are plenty of tech companies, startups mainly, that are doing specific piece of software that just resolves X.
Mhm.
And then you have other software that resolves Y. So the same thing is happening in risk management. That's what I see in some more recent years. Talking about when you're measuring risk, right? So in that regard, what you do need is to integrate very well, to be able to connect a component A with a component B and make sense of it, to be able to connect those two components with your data, with your input data, and be able to translate that into a number of reports or outputs that will be used by some other technology for BI purposes, for example. So at the end, some organizations have realized about the importance of having very good integrators, of having either a company that does know how to integrate different components, or having a platform that integrate those components. But because you are realizing that technology, certain type of technology might be very good for a specific function, and other type of technology would be better for other element that you need to be able to produce the whole risk management spectra in terms of your day-to-day management. So that is what I meant in terms of moving from a single huge platform that does do everything fantastically, which it's probably some idealistic view, to something that you need to understand. You need to build a solution that your company needs to resolve what you need, but your needs and the environment, technological and people environment of your own company would be different to the next one door. So therefore, you cannot have the same solution despite of using or pretending both being banks, pretending to use the same solution, but you have different realities. And in that sense, you should choose the technology components that are the right ones for you, and then have a very good integrator that connects the dots.
Okay, that's great. That's very clear, very understandable. I think that's going to be controversial as well, which I like, because there's a lot of companies, as you know, there's a lot of companies out there that are selling GRC platforms. And this is a platform that does it all. But what I liked about what you said is that, and we link it back to the futurist. The future may be that the successful GRC companies are those that can integrate specialized software to get you that GRC perspective. Because the specialized software will actually be a stronger tool than a GRC tool that has modules that does different things. I could see that would be maybe an alternative in the near future to companies when they're looking for risk management support.
Definitely. That's for me, that's really the key point that GRC must do. GRC is an umbrella.
Yeah.
You just can't do with the same technology, you just can't do everything perfectly. So GRC would be much more like, from a conceptual point of view, you are really combining, for example, a technology risk with operational risk with counterparty credit risk.
Mm-hmm.
But intrinsically, each one of these risks behaves completely different. Yep. They might have different statistical patterns. They might have different type of data. They might have different frequency of data that may or may not be relevant. So well, I am an economist and mathematician on the back, so that's, for me, you cannot define everything with the same methodology. So that's why you have to, when you're looking at GRC or integrated risk management, you have to look at what are the key points or the key indicators that each type of risk would produce, and from there you can manage a methodology and use a technology that crosses from there up, as opposed to try to go deeper to each type of risk, because you just can't go deeper with the same technology.
You know, that's interesting. As you're talking, I'm thinking a good GRC system should actually be like a credit committee or like a risk committee. If you have a table and you have the CFO, the chief credit officer, the CISO, the information security officer, the compliance officer, they're all sitting around the table sharing stuff, but they know their risk. And it's like you said, it's all different. And there's points where they touch and integrate, but there's also points where they don't. And a committee can do that. And that's what a GRC should be, is like that committee. It should allow that individual strength coming together. That's an interesting perspective.
And my view is that you need to start from a common ground, and from there up, and make a decision of what is the common ground, is where you have to look at the specific organization, because it might be that the organization just faces financial risks and operational risks, but they may not be facing other type of risks. So maybe the common ground for that organization is XYZ, and from there up, what are the risks? Or how do you identify the controls? What sort of matrix of risk and control matrix you should display? What sort of heat maps you have to have? Those sort of things that then, from a common ground up, then you can establish certain technologies that would be the best tools to manage GRC from an integrated perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we have time for one more question, Elizabeth. Let's change the tone just a little bit here. What are your thoughts about the ability of risk managers to communicate risk-based themes to CEOs? Are we effective? Could we be more effective? What are a couple of maybe some helpful hints, that some keys to success in that communicating risk issues to senior management, so they actually listen to us and consider what we're talking about?
I believe that the first thing that one must do is to understand the other party, the other part of a conversation. As a risk manager, one tends to be much more analytical, much more focused on what would be the potential causes, events, impacts, what could go wrong, and we are probably very on the dark side. We're always thinking things are going to go wrong. So that is necessary for us, for someone who is a risk manager or who is a risk has a risk career. It is necessary to understand risk, as well as to have a very analytical mind and be able to go deeper. But when you speak to the business, when you speak to the CEO must have a view, a business view. They need to be able to sell, generate revenue, be more profitable, be efficient, etc. So it's a completely different mindset. It's not that they don't understand analysis. They do perfectly understand analysis. Some of them are even extremely good at analysis. But they need to have a much broader view. So if you or one person as a risk manager comes with too much technicalities and too much details of the models and the potential impact and the worst thing that is going to happen next day because of ABC, without understanding the business first and how the business makes money, then you are not crossing the bridge. You need to go at least to the middle of the bridge and be able to say, well, I understand that this company makes money out of loans, or I understand this company makes money out of investing the client's money, right? So once you understand how the company makes money, then you are able to explain, okay, so the purpose is not to reduce the risk as much as possible. The purpose of the whole company, the whole organization, is to be able to be as profitable as possible, considering the risk profile and the risk appetite the company has. If you just come with the second part, not with the first, then you are not using enough information for the CEO to see your point, because you would be just talking about the bad things and the expenses and the cost and the potential loss of money, but you're not seeing the bright side, which is but we have to make money, otherwise your position is not useful. I mean, it's not useful, right? So that's I think the view. And I think it's quite often that you have risk managers just facing that or seeing that perspective, just the analytical, very risk-minded view, and not a business-oriented view that I believe one has to have.
Excellent. That's great advice. So let me ask you this before we say goodbye. If somebody wants to connect with you, get contact with you, how do they do that?
Yes, sure. Well, I'm in LinkedIn, Elizabeth Marvan. I have as well my email, elizabeth.marvan@RHISCO. RHISCO is with RHISCO.com. And then we can take it from there. I am also in other social media, but not necessarily that much of a frequent visitor.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'll make sure that people have your contact information, and we may invite you back. There's some other things that we could talk about that would be fun to kind of share your perspectives with our audience. But thank you, Elizabeth, for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan. Happy to come back anytime you want.
Thank you.